Welcome to the Newswire. Today we're talking about blue collar. I have to have a shout out to my Browns, the blue collar fans of the NFL. I only get to wear this sweatshirt a couple times a year because the Browns won yesterday. They beat those Packers, those blue collar Green Bay Packers. Today on the Newswire, we're talking about the blue collar squeeze. Right now in the nation, we are seeing 37% of recent high school graduates are pursuing careers in blue collar jobs. Just a massive increase because there's been such a devoid of blue collar workers. That's something that maybe if you've had to have someone do plumbing, electrical, construction, landscaping, any type of those things around your home, you've experienced. Today, Alex, we're going to talk about that.
Absolutely.
If the Jets had more of a blue collar approach, maybe they would have won yesterday.
You know, Jets are an interesting group of fans, Jets fans. There are a lot of blue collar, a lot of non.
I would say, but their team isn't
Oh.
fully blue collar yet.
No, I don't know what we are. We're green collar. But you know what was interesting? I was going to say about the jobs report. I don't know. You and I share a lot of information back and forth, but I don't know if you had time to look over that chart I sent you of year over year job growth in blue collar employment has considerably gone down since 2021, which, and this kind of what I talk about. I believe that white collar jobs, and we've seen it from tech companies to Amazon to Ford to all sorts of large scale businesses. I don't even know if we want to call it slowly, but have continued to eliminate roles and positions because of robotics and artificial intelligence. Makes total sense. With the blue collar jobs, like you see in this chart, manufacturing, construction, mining, logging, oil, gas, transportation, warehousing, utilities, those job numbers for hiring have continued to drop. What, in your opinion, because we can get into that Axios article maybe later, is causing the decline in the amount of blue collar jobs available as we see an influx in potential blue collar workers coming to the workforce?
I think it's just generational. If you look at, of these jobs, construction, manufacturing, mining, logging, transportation, utilities, those are, I would say, and I would throw agriculture into this because I know that firsthand, is, the average age of a farmer in the United States is over 60 years old.
Oh,
And
wow.
so I would imagine it's not much different in these industries. So what you're seeing is why we're seeing this decrease in the number of employed in blue collar industries is merely because they're retiring out and there has not been enough backfill over the last 25 years. Because we go back years ago and it's like, you want to ruin your life, go to a blue collar trade. You will just absolutely, work yourself to like, you won't be able, and there's some truth to it. But unfortunately, instead of thinking about, hey, start a blue collar trade and then either, develop your own business, do something to evolve within it. It just, and I think there was so much of this fear is like, if you enter into a blue collar, that's all you'll ever be, instead of like, no, there needs to be business owners, consultants, provide all sorts of other businesses that can align with it. I mean, here's the thing about it. It's like, you think about banking. I'll use banking as an example. What's the greatest, if you had an experience and you had a plumbing business, would you like to work with a banker who decided that after 5 or 6 years, plumbing is like, hey, this isn't for me, I want to move into finance. And all of a sudden you're working with someone, it's like, yeah, I know what it's like to work and run a plumbing business. I think that's valuable. And yet we've missed that opportunity. And so many people have never done anything with their hands. And so consultants, lawyers, bankers, like it used to be, growing up on a farm, a lot of people would, for a summer job, I'd work on a farm. I'd do something with my hands. I'd work on a roofing crew. Well, now there's so many limitations, all of those jobs, that you pretty much can't get any job that is in the blue collar trades unless you're over 18. And so for the people either to figure it out or to have a perspective of what that work looks like, we've missed out on. So coming back to it, I think the main driver is been the amount of people that are retiring, aging out. but that's why we're seeing this massive influx, because there's such a demand
So I was
for
gonna ask.
people to do blue collar work.
Yeah, I was gonna. Where's the demand coming from then? Is it in the manufacturing? Like, where do you think a lot of demand is coming from blue collar work?
Well, I think it comes back to what you mentioned earlier. I think it's the ones that aren't easily automated.
Yeah.
If you can, let's use fast food. Okay. Fast food is an example. You go to a fast food restaurant today, wherever you're at in the country, and most likely there is some type of kiosk that you can order from, either
Right.
in the drive-through or if you walk in. That has replaced jobs,
Yeah.
because there was a time and period where either minimum wage was driven up and we're like, the margin's not there, we'll automate to offset the cost, or we couldn't find the people.
Right.
And so when you look at a lot of those, I would say repetitive, tedious, there's not a lot of dynamic, you know, demand for, I don't want to say brain power, but it comes down to, it's just automated work. Yeah. It's easier to have a machine do it.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we've seen kind of automation replace those jobs. But you look at someone coming out to do, we happen to, our house, we need our sliders. Our house is 23 years old, and the sliders just are broken down, wear and tear, weather, whatever. And so those are getting replaced later this week. Well, there's no robot coming to do that. It's going to be a crew of 2, 3, 4 people that come with tools, and, they tear it out. They put in new. There's no robotics. Now, could they use some automation systems that make them more efficient? Sure. But it's still going to require people. And I
Yeah.
think that's where, in the industries where you can automate, you will. I go back to agriculture. Probably 30 years ago, there was a lot of immigration from Europe into Canada and also the US, a lot of farmers. And part of the automation they had in Europe was robotic milking systems. So essentially a cow would walk into a robotic system to get milked. And, now that is slowly over 30 years taken over. Why? Because a lot of people didn't want to do the tedious work of milking cows. And, that's where it's like, all right, well, we'll put in robotic systems. They've gotten, better and better. So it's not uncommon to go to farms in Europe, much less, eastern Canada, and, smaller farms in the US, and they have robotic milking systems. It's become pretty normal.
Yeah. You know what? I was just thinking about this. My buddy, my best friend, he is a garage door installation expert.
There you go.
Great grandfather started a garage door company. So maybe it's 100 years old now, but they have virtually not changed.
Yeah.
The style changes of garages, but he's
Yeah.
like, I mean, I feel pretty safe. I mean, I'm going to be installing garage doors or working,
Yeah.
for the business, but it's, my dad
Yeah.
did it when, in his 30s, and now runs the company. But yeah, that garage door, I was just thinking about, my God, he's like, I can't, there's no robots coming in here to put in these and fix the garage doors, install them.
I saw this the other day, having 2 young boys that are, looking at what are we going to do, for career. My daughter, who is going into the healthcare career, she's going to be an esthetician, because, skincare to all those, it's pretty hard to automate, right? And, so the other day I saw this where a friend of mine, he has a fuel delivery man come and fill up his vehicles, so he doesn't have to go to the gas station. It's like, all right,
Mhm.
it's a little, it's kind of, I joke, because it's like, there's some things in life you just need to do to, like,
Right.
but I also get it. If you're looking at it, say, hey, if that is a hassle for me, if I don't want to do it, and there's somebody willing to do it, to drive around and fuel up vehicles, great. Those are jobs that are available, that people will pay for that service. And, that's where it takes this. If a machine can't do it, man, there is so much work to be done. There's more work than there are people. And I think that's where we're seeing this great twist, which is actually bringing a problem. I shared this article with you. This was just the other day, I saw on from Fox Business. Trade schools facing shortage in qualified instructors as student interest in trade careers grow. And I think that's another factor where we have this generation of people my age, your age, that, we talk about, oh, if you get into a trade, that's all you ever do. It's like, no, you could get into a, career of being an instructor. Like you could start a school for people. I mean, there's all those opportunities that was missed out filling those roles because for so many years they said, you will waste your life if you go into that.
No, I think there are a lot more jobs than people think within the blue collar industry. There's a lot of opportunity to be an entrepreneur, to be your own business person. I just met a gentleman. I was at the park with my kids the other day. Got laid off his job as something tech company, and he's like, I started my own car washing company. So he drives to people's homes and washes people's cars, and then it expanded into like power washing. He's like, I got this van with all this gear. He's like a solopreneur, a guy, invested in this van, 50, 60, 70,000, whatever it was, all the gear. And he drives around. He's like, I love it. And he was like, tech guy.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's what's amazing is when you go from the position of, I don't want to say like unwilling to do the work, but you and I have talked about this, and I had somebody the other day, we were talking about it. It's like, I find solace in being out here taking care of my cows. Now, sometimes it's daunting. It has to be done, right? But yet there is something so gratifying to creating. There's something so gratifying to see something change and healthy. And I think that's where so much of our society, as we become more and more grounded by doing work, then all of a sudden we get to a point of we're probably going to be a lot healthier. We're going to feel a lot more connected. You think about this, right? If you and I know people, and we've been in this situation where you can spend the entire day never, have interacting like this on a screen, sitting behind a computer screen, maybe typing back and forth on Slack, right? That's all you ever do. You never interact with people or animals. And how different is it to, you can have an interaction where you do a job and, you create something, you do a service for someone that's physical and tangible. Man, it could be life-changing.
It's true. I mean, even with what I do now, right? I'm mostly behind a screen. I do travel here and there, and I love traveling. And in my careers in the past, and this is really pre-COVID, I found myself when I was out traveling and going to the office, I was a little bit happier, and I love my kids and my family, but it is that like you're going somewhere, you're physically active and picking things up or putting things down or setting things up and setting things down. There is like this like thing I was thinking about it this morning of just like the gratification you get when you're physically active doing something in the real world, in the virtual world. There is like a difference in that. And I was going to ask you this question because I've seen it and read about it and heard about it, is immigration and how immigration and the great, I guess, send off of immigrants we've had over the last several months is affecting, like, do you think it's, you hear all this job loss and farmers are having trouble. If people were, this is my take, if people came to this country illegally and they're getting deported, and if they could find a way back in legally, I think that's great. Doesn't this open the door up for people who are here legally? They could be foreigners that got here legally. They could be American born. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. The opportunity to start working in these trades or on a farm. Like, what's your take on the whole immigration aspect to this?
Why do you think so much of the U.S. Agricultural workforce became immigrant based?
But most people growing up on farms like yourself, basically ridiculed and told for many, many, many years, decades, that you need to go and leave the farm and go make something of yourself out in the city. I feel like that was probably the narrative for so long.
So what do you think about the people that maybe didn't grow up on a farm but were in those communities? Do you think they were encouraged to go find a job on a farm?
No.
Nope. Nope.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden we have these we don't, I mean, so many states, if you're part of the family, you can do work on a farm. But other than that, I mean, so many states, and it's just, to me, it's atrocious that, you can be someone who is, 14 to 16 to 17. If you grew up in rural communities, working on a farm was a legit job. The farmers needed it. They had extra work in the summer, and it was a great way for you to go do something, learn something. And in most communities, that has been eradicated. Most states
Mhm.
do not allow any of that work. It's sad. And then because of that, you have people that have no clue that that's even an opportunity for them. And
Mhm.
it is dirty work. It is hard work. I mean, you go back to micro and dirty jobs and him going through it. And it's like, so we have
Yeah.
such this society is that we're constantly telling people that is unworthy work. That is below you as a human. And then you have other cultures that are like, I'll come do that work because it's so much better than what I was doing before, or I'm used to that work. I can do that work and get paid so well. I'll come do it. And so it's really a societal issue is like, if we've taken these jobs and we've given to people that are willing to do it because we have so many people that are unwilling to do the work because they think it's below them. It's kind of like, to be you talked about your friend who has the power washing business, right? He at some point is like, I'm just gonna have to swallow my pride and do it, and loves
Yeah.
it. It comes back to is it this societal like pride issue where to go do physical labor, manual labor means that you're less of a person. We have to get past that, and I think we are, because the numbers that are showing is like you want to be an absolute like there was a quote that I read. I think that I shared this with you from one of an NBC News article is many grads find their degrees don't lead to jobs in their field. That is the definition of a broken system. Hey, go spend $100,000, $150,000 to get a degree, and then there's no jobs for that degree. That is a bait and switch if I've ever seen one. And it
And
comes
that
back to like, that's the problem.
and that was the problem. I remember when I graduated over 15 years ago from college, the, I remember always going out in New York and saying, "Hey, what do you do? What do you do?" No one ever did what they went to school for. This was 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
I did. I studied film and digital media, and I actually worked in that industry. And I was like, always, oh, you actually do what you went to school with? And this has been, to me, a 20-plus-year-old issue
Oh, yeah.
in the education system of, yeah, send your kids to these collegiate programs to do what, you know? And I luckily was one of the that I ended up doing what I studied, but so many found that do not. Majority.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think part of it is the inability in, a lot of schools, like many high schools got rid of trade opportunities within the schools the last 15 years. So kids never had an opportunity to figure it out. They didn't know that, there were other pathways for them. I think now we're seeing a resurgence. I know when I was talking to some of the administrators at the high school my kids go to, it's a new high school, but just their school district brought back in construction class. Like this year
Oh,
was the first year it was back in, and they have more people than they have spots that want to be a part of the class.
that's awesome.
Yeah, it
That's a
is. But I mean, it's also, here's one of the downsides of it. Did you know taking that class would not qualify your credits for a college
I
application?
was gonna say I was gonna say, does it qualify for college credits? No.
Nope. Nope. And so, when you look at people that are trying to get into, whether to play in athletics or other things, that's a consideration they have to have is, oh, can I take this class that I'm really interested in? Their construction management degrees. I mean, we have construction, architecture, all those things. Like, why not do something enhanced to understand it, to be able then to go to college and not be in one of these degrees, to end up with a business degree, a marketing degree, a computer science degree. And they're looking around and saying, oh, we've been out, sourced by AI, marketing AI, computer science AI, even in business, like, all right, that's pretty arcane. Yeah, you could use a lot of it, but is that something that's going to actually lead you into place to where you can get a total career in that field?
Yeah. Is your take there are let's just go like for the past like 5 years, there are more opportunities in blue collar work than white collar work. I think that's like definitely your
I
take.
don't know the number, but I would venture to guess if we talk to enough people in those industries, I bet it is north of 5 to 1.
5 to 1. So,
I bet
but
if you wanted to go get a job today for each job opening, and maybe that you could get in a quote unquote white collar sales, working
man,
remote, any of those, you know,
when-
it is there are 5 blue collar jobs available for each one of those. I bet that would be my guess.
but do you think so I agree. I think that but how about like if we just look at the job market in totality, it does seem like it is, because if even you look at that chart, the amount of jobs continues to go down, but the amount of blue collar job opportunities just outweighs white collar by so much, because how much white collar work has been eliminated because of robotics and artificial intelligence, and will only continue to do so. Like, is that
Well,
do you
here's
feel
the thing
fair?
that I don't have an exact figure on it, but there is a number where they kind of quote unquote calculate the um the chosen unemployed, the people that have decided I'm not going to work. Now that could
Right.
be a family situation, if it's a, partner, spouse, whatever. One is parenting, one's doing that, the home. All right, that's one thing, but it's another to where, nope, I'm just not going to look for a job and I'm going to utilize the system for welfare and social subsistence in the US. That number has continued to grow. And
Really?
that number, so when you look at it, to me, it's really hard to differentiate between these. Like, say, all of our jobs are going down. The total employed number in the US is going down. Yeah, I think we've seen that. And then
Yeah.
also to look at it and say, well, actually, there's a lot of opportunity for blue collar jobs. People are just say, I don't want to do that. That's below
That
me.
makes sense.
I don't want to go there, because I think if you were to, you know, go to people, I don't know, it'd be worthy interest to go
That's
to,
yeah.
say, an unemployment office, and they don't have those anymore because you can do it all online, but to be able to go through like unemployment surveys and find out, are you willing to go do manual labor? And
Yeah.
I'm just going to throw out a number. The people that are collecting unemployment, my guess is, perpetual unemployment, because I know there's seasonal work where they use unemployment to balance their income. It is what it is. It's a tool. I know they do it
Yeah.
because of seasonal work. But you go into a time, it's like, you know, middle of June, and it's like, well, you're unemployed. Are you willing to go do manual labor? No.
Yeah. One job that I think in the that is
Now,
really
that's
gonna
all opinion and speculation, right? Okay.
yeah, no, I know. That's what
Yeah.
you're speculating on that. But no one job that I do think is gonna get hit hard, probably in the next 10 years, is drivers. Like trucking, this I don't know if you've seen the self-driving trucks, like the 18-wheelers and the cars. I think they're gonna get like what is it? What is the union that has all the drivers? Um remember they had that whole story?
Here's the challenge. Unless something changes financially for those businesses, they can't afford to do it.
To get those
And
used trucks.
this is what it happened a lot in agriculture is, for many years, people are like, man, I would build, new facilities. I would upgrade. I need to get more efficient. I know what I'm doing now is costing me. I know that, but I don't have either the capital available, because my business isn't worth enough. There's not enough margin in order to cover the note to automate. So when you look at it, for example, I know some trucking, I know some people and what they'll do is like, oh, we'll add 1 or 2 trucks. We'll add this or that and see if it works. But to see a major shift, I don't think we're going to, Now, could it be, some type of easy transit? Is there a sector that will embrace it? Sure. There will be a sector where it's companies like, say, Amazon. Amazon that's moving from one distribution to another distribution. They have enough margin to where they can automate that. Okay. But when you look at the people that are delivering most goods to, consumer places, I don't see it happening because I don't think they have enough margin in there to totally retool. Now, that doesn't mean that you might see more and more go that way. But I think it's going to be limited. And I think they may end up finding out. I mean, again, is it, again, I think there's going to be challenges to it.
I agree. I can't remember the what's the union with all the truckers and drivers. I can't remember the name.
I don't
Union
know what it is. Yeah.
But I feel like they'd have to be put into some place within the union shops across the nation. Say, hey, they want to buy 50 new self-driving trucks. Can you just eliminate 50 drivers like that if they're all union workers? I'm sure they have.
I don't know. I mean, that's another big challenge in itself. I'm not sure, but I think that's where I don't know that it'd be interesting to know the numbers. I know a couple people that own trucking businesses. And we've talked about some of this stuff, the number of large, Teamsters. Yeah. I think that's, if you were to look at the total products that are moved on trucks in the US, that of their proportion, now they may have a part in the chain, but it's to think of the whole chain. I wonder if it is a pretty small percentage in reality.
Let's Google it. In 2023, a total of 165.2 million tons of goods were transported by the road. I mean, that sounds like a lot. I don't know, percentage wise, but I mean, you see them on the road all the time. There isn't a time you go on the road without seeing.
Oh, I mean, there's trucks everywhere, and there is an industry for sure that we need new people. That's why, we've seen some of the issues recently where there's a lot of immigrants that have chosen those, jobs and cause some issues, right? But I think grand scheme, that is going to be an industry because of the cost. It's easier to take a factory and retool all that than it is to go to a trucking company that's privately owned by, that maybe has 30 to 50 to 100 trucks and say, hey, how soon are you going to move to, automated trucks? It's like, I think about my friends. There's a friend of mine. He works, he's a manager on a farm that I worked at in New York. And they ended up putting in robotic milkers probably in the last 20 years. And they did so, one, because it was kind of a very forward-thinking producer, but as well, they did it in expansion. So as they were expanding, they built a new facility with a robotic, and then over time, they retooled the rest of them to meet that. And I think that's where you could see where people are like, oh, we have an opportunity to expand. Great. We'll add a line of automated drivers, but we're not going to swap out because of the cost.
Yeah. I think, what's going to happen is this generation, you're going to have like that 10-year generation that like everyone swings over to blue collar and the pendulum just like, I'm a plumber. And then there's too many jobs in there, in 2035 or whatever.
Yeah. We'll see it. I mean, we saw the pendulum go to all white collar, a lot of tech, a lot of computer science, a lot of those things, a lot of business. It's all the 9-to-5s, and now we're seeing it swing back. And my kids are much on that. Here it'd be interesting to see where your kids are, 10, 12 years younger. Where does that all of a sudden switch? We'll find out. But before we get too long in the tooth, before we get too far away, wanted to bring up and talk a little bit with you just about the Charlie Kirk Memorial. Yesterday, it happened in Phoenix, Arizona. There has been reported over 200,000 people in the area that were in the one or two facilities they had to take part in that memorial service. I did pick up something yesterday that there was over 100 million people that watched bits or pieces, parts of the memorial service. Just kind of wanted to get your take on what you've read as you've picked up, as you've gathered information. I will say this one thing, and it's been loud and clear. And I just want to say something about it. One is not like the other. There's been a lot of comparison to when George Floyd died in Minneapolis back in early 2020s, and comparing it to Charlie Kirk. And, one of the things they brought up is, there was a memorials for George Floyd. There was these big state memorials. There was I think a sculpture, a statue of George Floyd. And when you think of that comparison to a guy like Charlie Kirk, one is not like the other, right? There's a racial component, but I'm just going to say this. One who had been incarcerated, was a criminal, and did those things, and was killed in the pursuit act or whatever. And I won't get into the full details, and please don't hold me to it exactly. But there was a drug, there was a crime part of it, whereas a guy who did not have a career, I don't think ever faced any indictments, any federal charges, convicted of anything, who was simply having a conversation with people and was shot and killed. Those could not be any farther. And so when people want to, say that, one deserves a memorial and the other one shouldn't, like there's an individual representative from Minnesota who is saying that he should be thrown out with the trash bin. It's like, that is where we lie as a problem. And to think that during that period of George Floyd, all of the riots, all of the destruction, everything else, and again, to have a memorial with, over 200,000 people, and not one, even to the people that are trying to detract from the praise, the celebration of Charlie's life, not one, I would say, civil unrest. That should stand out to people. And I don't think there's a group of people that want to accept that, yeah, this is different. Okay. Your take.
I was, I'm not going to compare and contrast the differences. That can be a whole episode in of itself, but there are massive differences between those two people. Yeah. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
The big, I was on the road most of the day Sunday because I had to, pick up my wife at the airport. But when I went on Twitter and I started reading, the number one thing that, everyone spoke and all the big shots were there, and everyone was, giving their sympathies. But the wife forgiving the shooter, I don't think I can't remember, or that I recall, or something so massive where the wife, which, who's I'm sure enraged about this, like forgave the shooter for killing her husband and, taking away the father to their kids, which is, I get almost teary-eyed thinking about it. That forgiveness, like that is just incredible. I just thought that act and just saying it, I'm sure she feels a lot of hatred and like pain there, but to say it and to do that, I thought was like, that was like an immense thing to do.
I think here's the piece that I think is, I'll go into a faith perspective. Faith yesterday was a huge part of it.
Yeah.
And, there's a point where, if you, from a Christian point of view, where Jesus does, you forgive your sinners. You forgive those that sin against you. And I almost believe that had she not, but don't take this right, had she not, it would have been almost as iconic as she did. Meaning, I have to think, from everything that I've heard, the amount of threats against his life, which had been quite numerous, and that they had these discussions. Hey, there's a chance that I could get, killed for what I'm doing. There's no doubt, knowing that the number of threats that has been reported he had, and to yet say, this is still what I'm called to do, and there's purpose. And, I'm thinking they had to have some discussion at some point as a family. Yeah, it could end up this way, but man, I am called to go do this, and I'm going to continue to do it. I only say that because of how she's responded with such voracious tenacity and strength.
Yeah, she had.
That to me, there had to be an understanding of the yes, this could possibly happen, but you know what? Your it will not to choose to be a martyr, right? I don't think he chose that. It'd just be my
No.
guess, but yet that is what happened. And the amount of support, the amount of outreaching, the public statements from such a side to say, if nothing else convicted us to act, this for sure has.
Yeah.
And, I think one of you talk about that really spoke out to you. There's a woman, I can't remember her name. I saw it on X as well. She was raised Muslim. And she said, in the Muslim faith, when you have funerals, it's more of a, hey, look at the bad side of life. This could happen to you, as she, this is paraphrasing. And it wasn't a celebration of life. And, funerals, like they have been in many Christian circumstances, are very somber. And I think there's a turning of a lot of people like, hey, just be like, celebrate their life, celebrate what they accomplished. And I think that's what it became. And also, it really was an outpouring of Christian, to your point, of forgiveness. And she said, I could only wonder what it would be like to be in that type of community. And I think that was pretty outstanding in itself of,
Yeah.
You look at this and here's the other take that I took from that. And if we look at the last 25, 30 years of, we'll call it religious fighting throughout the world. If we look at between right now what's going on in Israel, between Palestine and Israel, between the
human history.
Well, yes. And then when you look at kind of like in the US, what's going on, and realizing that, there are no different than in the early life of Jesus, Judaism, all those things. There was a lot of religious fighting, but yet most of the people are like what this individual shared in saying, hey, love those close to you. And that was the outpouring of what came from that event yesterday is love and forgiveness and, try to come together. And when you see these people that are outspoken in the United States that were protesting at the event yesterday, that have gone on to continue to try to tear down a person and his message. And I think what we're at is no different than what I've learned about a lot of people in the Muslim faith, that, they are very kind, loving, caring people. And yet you have this one terrorist side that causes all the problems. And as I thought about this in our conversation today, and I think what we're seeing in the United States today, as this lady who shared about her Muslim faith and just so appreciative, is that we have such a small sector that is indoctrinating so much terroristic hate in our country. And I think it is either agnostic, atheist. I think it's of a faith that is not to be, appreciative, between the Jews and the Christians, the Muslims, that there's many hundreds of millions and billions of people that act in a way to show love. I mean, we can go through the other faiths, from Hindu to Buddhist to whatever else, that no, we need to act in love. And yet we have these small subsets that are very terroristic in their nature, that are causing a lot. And I think when we stop and look at our country, man, it's this overwhelming, hey, we're going to show love. We're going to show the right way to care. And, what you brought up about Erica and forgive, that's the path forward, and not the terroristic movements that we've seen from some.
And that's where where I think both parties politically have done a horrible job at. Trump's is just as guilty of that kind of rhetoric, and he's probably not going to stop. That's just the way he is. Whatever. And it's from that event, I shared the story. I think it was a week ago. What happened to my wife and a good friend of hers, and friendship was gone because of this. And it's so silly to me, when she said that, like this forgiveness thing. Everyone is what everyone should just go out on a very clear night and look up in the sky, and you'll see, just in your view, probably hundreds of thousands of stars.
Yeah.
We are on this like tiny little ball within an infinite universe, and just stare and just think about what the hell are we all fighting about on this little tiny ball of water and
Yeah.
rock?
Yeah.
And forgive somebody, and just, you have such a small amount of time on this
Yeah.
planet, and everyone fighting over what?
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
it's pretty outstanding. And again, um, I think we talked, maybe a mention about this last week, is does Charlie Kirk end up falling into the remembrance in this country of some of the the greatest social servants? When I think of a Abraham Lincoln, when I think of a Martin Luther King, when I think of, others, um, in this country, does he fall into that? I heard something, I'd never thought of it, and it was quite interesting. Um, there was a comment from someone, is he would have been president at some point. And I was
Could
like,
have been, yeah.
wow, I just hadn't even thought about that, but possibly. And, when you think about that type of person, and, here's the interesting part for me. My kids right now are in high school, my youngest, two. And I wonder what it's going to be like when they're my age. It's kind of like my parents, who, were that age when Martin Luther King was assassinated, when JFK was assassinated. And like, asking them, it's like, the parallels, and we've talked about that. What's going on right now, the civil unrest in our country, is not much different than what was going on in the 60s.
Yeah, similar.
And, here's the thing that I take that in concept, and we can sit and we can, appreciate the life of Martin Luther King Jr. and what it meant. And yet, it wasn't long ago where some of that hatred was still in our country. I thought about this, and it's hard for me to say it, but it's also, I understand it. And what's going to be different is, I can remember in high school, and I grew up in rural part of Ohio, right? And I remember, we would Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and there were people that, at that point, and that was probably 30 years after the assassination, were calling it his Assassins Celebration Day. Right? From a racial, from a just a, and it's like, that happened. And, so when we see this side that wants to celebrate, his death, it's like, I look back in what I experienced some 30 years ago, and it's like, yeah, that'll happen. But yet, I think if we look at what Martin Luther King Jr. means in our society, if people hold on to that, wow, he caused massive change. But yet that change still takes a while. And again, I saw that because it did remember that this last week. It's like, oh, okay. How is this going to be in 30 years? How are my kids going to remember back? And how are they going to explain it to their children? I think that's a concept that I think is very
Yeah. No,
awing.
I mean, in our human history, there are people that have a certain level of impact on the world. And if you look back 2000 years, 25 years ago, the guy named Jesus was born. Now, whether you believe, what's crazy about him is every major religion recognizes him, that there was
Yeah.
a person named Jesus, right?
Yeah.
And he had such an impact on the world. And during that time period, what was going on? War, bloodshed, Sodom and Gomorrah, all this like bad stuff was happening on the world. And then you have this guy come along, right? Teaching peace and all these other things, and love, and, caring for.
And, I think what's interesting is, I think Charlie, modeled a lot of what he did based upon what Jesus did. If you read of what Jesus did, it was very similar. And, and again, I think that's probably by his faith, how he chose to act.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's very interesting. But as we talk about it, I think where,
I was just going to finish with that, with just saying,
yeah,
like,
please.
in his legacy, obviously, like, impacted the world at like the highest level. But then you have Emmett, like, there's just people throughout history that like impact society and
Yeah.
leave a legacy bigger than
Yeah.
others. And that's
Oh,
just the
yeah.
way it is. And I think
Yeah.
he will have a legacy that will have an impact and live on,
Yeah.
bigger than most
Yeah. I
have
mean,
had.
we're already seeing that. And um, I think again, as we go on in time and we continue to, propel forward, the two things that I've seen very much over the last, 2 weeks is the outpouring of love and care from people. The, people that are really speaking of like, no, this dude really cared about people. So whatever stories you're twisting, that's not reality. And then the other point is how much, and again, I have no idea what his faith basis is, but to see a guy who is so impactful like Elon Musk and reading on X yesterday, and he's shared pieces of the Lord's Prayer. And if you're familiar with it, the verse, and it was just kind of like, I think that's what's going to be very interesting is how his life lives above and beyond what his impact was because of how he went about his relationships. I think we're seeing that, and we're going to see that more and more and more. The people that, completely did not like the guy, who I think Van Jones the other day is like hated the guy. And yet one of the last messages that Charlie sent was like, hey man, I'd love to have you on the show. I'd love to have a conversation with you. And Van, after he got that message, after Charlie had been assassinated, was so taken aback that he is going out and sharing that everywhere, and people almost can't believe it. And it's like, yeah, that's who he was. So to
Great.
that note, thanks for joining us. Thanks for being here. Have a great rest of your day. Until next time, choose to lead with impact.